Сайн байцгаана уу хүн үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр манай Defacto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Америкийн алдартай CNBC телевизийн алдартай сэтгүүлч хадагтай Мишел Caruso-Cabrera оролцож байна.
Мишел Caruso-Cabrera CNBC телевизийн олон улсын сурвалжлагч. Мишел Кабрера Валенсли коллежийг эдийн засагч мэргэжлэр 1991 онд төгссөн. Америк нэгдсэн улсын CNBC, VTSP телевизийн нэвтрүүлэгч, Univision телевизэд продюсераар мөн Power Lunch нэвтрүүлгийн хөтлөгчөөр ажиллаж байжээ. Мишел Кабрера Univision телевизэд ажиллаж байхдаа бэлгийн замын халдвар төвчтэй хүүхдүүдийн тухай 5 цуврал нэвтрүүлэг хийж телевизийн Emmy Award чагнал авч байсан. Мөн тэрээр CNBC телевизийн удирдах зөвлөлийн гишүүн.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please see you in our show.
It is a pleasure to be here, an honor. Thank you for asking me.
So you have been traveling a bit in Mongolia.
Yes.
How was it?
Beautiful. Mongolia is a beautiful country. We've been all over the countryside and just loved it and excited about the potential economic developments here as well.
You could feel?
Oh yes, absolutely, sure.
Tourism?
Tourism, yes, but also when I'm told that there are many buildings here that weren't here 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you can see the growth happening, which is exciting.
Yeah, this is tremendous, and however, we would like to see more. This wealth comes to every household, which is not that easy.
No, it's not. The transition from a planned economy by the government to a market economy, which is much more fair and just, can take a very long time.
And you are exactly the same person who should talk about that, because you are an economist, and you have been on media for all your life, and you have achieved tremendous success. And the CNBC is a well-respected, large cable TV network in the States, in the world. So you have been there working all your life. Please tell us, what is CNBC for you now?
CNBC was a tremendous place to work. I was there for 20 years, and in fact, I'm still going to be a contributor. I'm going to appear on the network several times a month to do commentary. I specialize in international news. I was the chief international correspondent. That meant that I've covered a lot of international financial crises. I spent months and months in Greece, for example. By the time the Greek financial crisis was over, I had a doctor in Greece, I had a dentist in Greece, I had an eye doctor in Greece, I had everything that I needed in Greece because I spent so much time there. Also the financial crisis in Cyprus as well. But those were really important things to cover because, you know, economists sometimes speak very antiseptically, very dryly. They will say things like,
Greece needs to go through a fiscal adjustment.
A fiscal adjustment means budget cuts, pension cuts. Balancing a budget is very, very painful for society. Necessary, and what comes out on the other side is better, but you want to show people what does that actually mean, and what does it mean to make the very hard decisions that governments have to make sometimes.
Well, that makes the difference between journalists and economists. You just bring to the level of ordinary people what does that for their own life.
Right.
So what, as an economist and also journalist, what is that key ingredients that makes you that much accessible by ordinary people?
Most stories actually aren't that complicated, and many people make them more complicated than they should be. Most stories are actually very, very simple, and you need to tell them in simple ways. Wall Street, often economists, they use very big words when the concepts that they're talking about are actually very, very simple. And so to speak in simple terms about what are supposedly complicated ideas, that's what I've always worked the most to do.
The CNBC in that sense, giving a lot more explanation in that sense. I was living in the States and studying there, and I'm familiar with your famous products, with your show. What makes CNBC different than CNN and other Fox News? And what did that, do you have any political kind of closeness to any?
So other networks are mostly politics. and what we call mainstream news, general news. CNBC is business news and economic news, right? We cover the stock market. We cover economic policies that will affect the stock market. We cover foreign policy that will affect the stock market and the economy. But everything's always through the lens of, or the prism of the economy and also the financial markets. Is it good for business or is it not good for business? So we don't take an official political leaning. Many other networks do in the United States. They have a very particular political leaning. Ours is simply, what is good for business?
What is the main that principle that keeps you in that way?
Oh, that's very, very easy. The stock market tells you. The stock market tells you every day. The stock market tells you that the economic policies of the new administration have been very, very good for the economy. So does, by the way, the economic data also drives it. You can have many, many people talking and complaining, but when the GDP comes out and it's the highest it's been in years, when unemployment is the lowest it's been in years, those are the facts.
So, and in that sense, you have been running, been on and off on this powerful show called Power Lunch. Tell us about the Power Lunch. What makes that success of this program?
So Power Lunch happens right in the middle of the day.
12?
Yeah, 1 to 3 in the afternoon. And it was designed to be, if you think about a football match or an American football match, we have a morning show that's the pregame, right? That's Squawk Box. Then the game starts at 9:30 in the morning. And then we have like what we consider the halftime report. By the time you get to 1 o'clock, most of the stock market reaction to whatever the news of the morning is already going to have been put into the market. So we consider the middle of the day a time where we can spend longer amounts of time on an interview, whereas in other parts of the day, the interviews are 3 minutes. We'll do 6-minute interviews, which is long in the United States.
Yes, and our Power Lunch is consisting of this sort of really people who is carrying that changes on the stock market up by that time of our day particular.
Yes, and also, but we spend a lot of time on policy, on economic policy and administration policy, because there's more time to talk about the merits, you know, the pros and cons of any policy.
And so that means it requires you to be really in the course of every changes every day from morning till all the way night.
I never stop reading. I never stop reading, ever, ever, ever. From morning, noon, night, and I read a lot of policy papers. I read a lot of research that comes out of analysts. I mean, when I pick up the newspaper in the morning, I still get a physical newspaper, several of them. When I pick up the newspaper, there should be nothing new in there. Everything in that newspaper, to me, should feel old. It should feel like yesterday's news, right? So.
Wow.
Yeah, nothing there should surprise me.
And did you get any surprise?
Sometimes there are very good investigative pieces, you know, by the Wall Street Journal, for example, that, oh, that's surprising, you know. But when it comes to the day-to-day economic news or stories about companies, nothing should surprise me.
Yeah, also because the competition presses on you, right? Other also channels try to go with this news, and then that means if you can, that feeling of this news in that way, you should be a good investor on markets.
So CNBC has always had concerns about conflict of interest. So they only allow us to invest in mutual funds or ETFs. We cannot own individual stocks because they never want it to be perceived that we are trying to influence something that we own. So that's been true. I am allowed to own Comcast. That's the parent company of CNBC, because I think everybody assumes that we are going to have some predilection towards the company, you know?
Wow. So the people who, because what you are saying is also impacting on the way people receive the news, right? And in your career, what was the most interesting program you ever participated?
My interview with Milton Friedman.
Okay.
I've interviewed him several times, But the first time I interviewed him was extremely eye-opening to me and gave me a lot of clarity about what the role of government should be in any economy. It should be very small.
You wrote a book called You Know I'm Right, More Prosperity, Less Government in 2010. Obviously it's after meeting several times him.
Yes, I dedicated my book to Milton Fridman, actually. Yeah, he makes it very, very clear what should government do. The federal government should only do 4 things. Protect the borders, maintain law and order, enforce private contracts so that you protect private property, and do as much as possible to foster competition in the economy. That's it. And so many people want government to do so many things, which government isn't very good at. Government isn't very good at anything, but you have to allow them to do the things that only they can do, like protecting the borders, right? We can't do that as individuals. It's got to be done at a federal level.
What is the state level in the U.S.?
State level? The state level. So, you know, his idea was that government should be as local as possible so that people can always move. I think he would have liked to have seen as much, you know, education should be done at the town or the municipality level, not even at the state level. So if you don't like the policies in that town, you can move to a different part of the state or a different part of the country. He got worried when the federal government wanted all laws to be federal. Well, then where are you going to go? You know, because we always say people walk, you know, move and they walk with their feet and they tell you the economic policies in this state are good or the economic policies in that state are bad. You just look at who's moving where.
On the same topic, let's talk about the health care. We used to call it also Obamacare.
Yes.
Now Trump is changing completely. What's behind? What is to be that health care? At which level and who is to take care of your health?
So the United States has always believed much more in private health care than the rest of the world. And I think that is the much better way to go. We have had more and more and more insurance in the US, or when you look at any part of the world, third-party payers. I don't actually pay for my health care. I pay an insurance company that then pays for the health care. And the minute you disconnect the buyer from the seller, price doesn't clear the market anymore. You, the insurance company, you, the doctor, aren't working to please me. You're working to please the insurance company. And so the dissatisfaction levels grow tremendously. When the government has to pay for everyone's insurance, the government rations, right? They make choices. Older people should get less health care because they're not going to live as long as young people, right? So if you believe in the freedom and liberty of the individual, you want private health care that you and I pay for. And it would be much cheaper and much more affordable if you didn't have insurance companies involved, because you would be paying for it directly. You ever a doctor's office in America, the back room, you know what it's filled with? It's not filled with nurses and doctors. It's filled with people filling out forms for the insurance companies to make sure everybody gets paid. It's a waste of money.
That's what exactly I saw. So much paperwork. And at the end, you just to come to see the doctor that your eyes are red and you have a pain. You go to see the eye doctor and they say, oh, you have a pain. I know that. But that just visit costs $100 in any way. And also, I think exactly your point, the doctor's mistake, insurance is becoming so expensive that the price comes up. And medical care is becoming not accessible, not affordable to ordinary Americans, and that's why they have no insurance. What is the solution, you think, in that regard, with the current, what you have now?
Oh, I think individuals should absorb more of the individual costs of insurance. And people think, oh, it would be too expensive. No, on the contrary, it would be much more affordable, because if the doctor didn't have to pay all those people to fill out the paperwork, he could charge you a lot less.
How to stop that machine started
moving
moving in the US?
It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. Rand Paul is one of the few members of Congress who sees it that way. We are, under President Trump, doing more affordable health plans, which are what I call car accidents and cancer, catastrophic plans. The cost is very low because they're only going to cover your costs if you have a major accident or you become very, very sick, right? But all of the other things, the basic things like going to see the doctor once a year, but that doesn't get covered. People say, oh, that should be covered. Well, wait a minute. People know that they need to pay for their food. People make choices every day about what house they're going to live in, how much rent they're going to pay. Why can't people be responsible for one medical visit a year to go see their doctor?
But how do you see in that regard the Trump administration approach?
The Trump administration has tried to reduce the level of government involvement in health insurance. So what they've just done, for example, the Labor Department there allowed companies to provide plans that are exactly as I've described, much more catastrophic plans. So that way someone knows that if they get injured, the deductible, that initial payment, it may be very high. It could be as high as $5,000. However, that's a lot better than the $1 million it can cost you when you end up in the hospital under severe consequences.
How to move the change inside of minds of those Americans who have no insurance in that regard?
It's very, very hard. It takes very good ambassadors. We don't have a lot of good ones right now. You're right.
Well, you are one of them. May I ask you about the current changes that TV, if we can say, the traditional TV is facing today, with the whole challenges of social media accounts. How you adapt, how CNBC, how your program is adapting to that changes?
Embracing everything, just like you. Embracing Facebook Live, embracing as much content on the internet, streaming. You can watch all of our networks on your phone. So that's what I've been doing. I'm out of town. I watch it on my phone, or I watch it on my iPad. We put stuff on Netflix. We do documentaries. I interviewed Pitbull once. That's available on Netflix. It's an hour-long documentary about him. So all the different platforms, we now put things on YouTube where we didn't before. We used to worry about cannibalizing the product, and we don't anymore. Now we just seek out advertising revenue from every possible point.
Because the social media advertising to traditional media is coming less.
Yes.
So how to deal with that, with the cost?
Yeah, that's above my pay grade, as we like to say. We're very lucky at CNBC because we still deliver a very particular audience, a wealthy audience of a certain income. So we've still maintained higher revenue streams per eyeball compared to what we've seen at other networks. But you're right, spreading to, the joke in the United States is we went from analog dollars to digital dimes.
Digital dimes.
So you have to do a lot more digital dimes to make up for the analog dollars.
What's your take on this cryptocurrencies? Does it have future, or it has different features?
I'm going to give you the most cliche response out there, which is the underlying technology in terms of transfer of title, I think is probably going to be very, very important. But whether or not the actual currencies become a replacement currency, I don't see why you would do it in the United States. I can see why you would do it in Venezuela, for example, where you can't trust the currency. I'd much rather own Bitcoin if I lived in Venezuela than owning, the Bolivar. But in the United States, I don't know what it does for you.
You also, your short name is MCC.
Yes,
right?
That's my nickname.
Yep. You got an Emmy Award for a 5-part series on children with AIDS while you were working on CNBC, also WTSB TV, St. Pittsburgh, Florida, right?
Actually, that Emmy was when I was at Univision Spanish Television, my first job.
Univision, what happened? Why? What is the program about?
So my first job out of college, so that's almost 30 years ago.
Not that long ago, so
when I was 5 years old, I always joke. I was at Univision Spanish Television. That was my first job out of college. And I was a junior producer on a team of about 4 or 5 people. And the AIDS crisis was very new. We've made a lot of progress on AIDS. People now live with AIDS. There's drugs that will...
Nowadays already we kind of used to.
Right, right.
Those days,
but those days, it was brand new. And we thought that there were going to be many children who were going to be left as orphans because both their parents, we believed, were going to die from AIDS. So we were a national network, Univision, and is a national Spanish language network in the United States. So we focused on a family in Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, Washington, D.C., and Houston, and interviewed all those families about what they were doing to prepare for the possibility that their children were going to be left without them. It was a heartbreaking series, but I'll bet a lot of those parents actually survived, which goes to show you the progress that we made very quickly.
Good for them. Huh?
Yeah.
And it was, well, at least psychologically, you have prepared whole nation for this kind of possible outcome.
Yes, yes. And it was great to work with that team.
You also, there is the organization called National Association of Hispanic Journalists. Yeah, they got also, you won the Broadcaster of the Year 2004.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I was very honored to be selected by them as Broadcaster of the Year. National Association of Hispanic Journalists is an organization of journalists who are all of Hispanic descent, either Mexican American, Cuban American, Puerto Rican, you know, wherever they're from. But you know, the common denominator is that we all come from a heritage where Spanish was the dominant language. And there are particular things that you cover when you are a Spanish language journalist. Immigration is a huge, huge issue to the audience. So we spent a lot of time talking about immigration when I was there.
Your mother is Cuban origin.
My mother immigrated to the United States from Cuba when communism took over Cuba.
Okay, the first generation to come to the US.
She left in '62, and Fidel Castro took over January 1, 1959.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you grown up bilingually?
Yes. My Spanish got much better once I went to college and I studied in Spain, but yes, my mother and my grandmother spoke to me in Spanish as a child.
How about Italian, your father?
He's Italian,
yes.
But he didn't speak to me in Italian, he spoke to me in English, so I don't speak Italian, regretfully.
Which languages you speak?
I speak Spanish and English, that's
English
it.
and Spanish,
yes.
Okay. At a certain point, when journalists write books, you talked about this book and you talked about Friedman. Are you going to write another book?
I'm thinking about it. Now that I'm going to have a little more time, I'm doing it. I have a new job. I'm going to be on the board of directors of a company, which is a new thing in America where not many women have been on boards of directors, which is a very important position in corporate America.
Surprisingly interesting in the U.S. You know, you would expect, you know, in the U.S., the most liberal country, you would have more women on the board, not unlike the Scandinavian countries where they have more.
Right. Yeah, that's because they've mandated with quotas in Scandinavia, and we don't like quotas in the United States. We like merit. And so it's been progress. It's been years. Yes, but we are making progress, and there are more and more women who are getting into these positions, and I wanted to be one of the first ones joining a board. So that's going to take up time, and then maybe when I figure out how much time that takes, then maybe I write another book. But first, my priority is my work on the board of directors.
You are the person really who we're living every day with the telejournalism. You are the television journalists. Tell us about what makes that profession special, or what does it require to be at the height of that professional requirement.
It takes a very thick skin.
Okay.
You must be willing to tolerate rejection, right? Because you apply to many, many jobs, and you don't get the vast majority. And then when you're trying to be a reporter, many, many people tell you no, they don't want to talk to you because they're trying to hide things or they just don't want to be on TV. So it takes will. But journalism in America is very, very special. It is what makes America an exceptional country. It is protected by the Constitution, by the First Amendment of the Constitution. And so it's a very wonderful thing. In the United States.
You said First Amendment, because not everybody knows here about amendments and the constitutions. It was not the case in the the original.
Right, it was not in the original Constitution. They added.
So
it, yes.
how long it took a time to get?
That is a good question. I don't remember the answer.
So probably 100 or so years. No?
Yeah.
First Amendment. Okay, the First Amendment's the freedom of speech, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I do agree that. What I have seen in America is the capacity of talking things openly, whatever is hard problem.
Yes.
You discuss it.
Yes.
Not try to hide, not avoid, right? That was the September 11 when I have experienced it myself. I was living in Colorado.
Okay.
And they start to talk, why, how come it happened like this? Then there were so many informations coming, why the pilots were trained, where they were trained,
yes.
who are there. And
yes.
That was, and I was feeling that it was very hard, terrible, right? These two buildings collapsed. And then you see, okay, if these people can discuss like this open, of course they will solve the problem. That was my impression.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of introduction to me, to this journalist's world. And speaking about that event, was a surprise? What was your day there?
Oh, wow, September 11th was very, very hard. I was in makeup, getting ready, when the first plane struck. I had just finished makeup when the second plane struck. They tried to send me into the city, but all the bridges had shut down, so I couldn't get there.
Your office in New York?
New Jersey.
New Jersey,
yes.
across the road?
Yes, across the river.
And
so we covered, we knew many people who had died in the buildings, or we assumed that we had people who were frequently guests on CNBC, because there were many Wall Street offices in there who passed away as a result, or we assumed. It was heartbreaking, and it was an awakening that we faced an enemy that we didn't realize existed.
So since then, the world is changing.
Mm-hmm.
The way we look at each other, in particular if we are different religious people, particularly Muslims, the way we're traveling. And today, after almost 20 years,
yep.
that scares. We are afraid of all these things happening anywhere around. As a person who traveled so many countries in the world, not only see yourself, but expressing your pain in emotions to public, what do you see the solution of this big problem of hatred that brings us to that September 11 events? How can we stop it? Can we stop it?
Well, unfortunately, in many countries, there still isn't freedom of expression, right? And there isn't freedom of discussion, nor is there freedom of religion. So a lot of hatred comes because a government tells people
what to do.
These people are infidels, these people are wrong, these people are evil, what they do is wrong, the way they live their lives is wrong.
It is. What's the solution? Should we continue live like this, or what that we can, as a rational people, can make any kind of steps?
You know, it's very tough. We don't want to be, I think, in the United States in the position of telling everyone else how to live their lives, or what they should be, or what they should do. I think we try to serve as an example, right? Beacon on the hill. Look at the prosperity and the peace you can have if you follow this kind of thinking. I think the best we can do is to be the most perfect example to the degree that is possible, right? Perfection is never possible, but we can try to reach toward it.
Not interfering too much, but just by your example, as any leadership does, right?
Because when you tell people what to do, they sometimes don't want to hear it, right?
Work.
They almost reject it. So.
And in this regard, there is, of course, a role of journalism. Media is important. So I think everywhere, in all normal, free country, democratic country, wherever we are, we try to do a small part that makes the world better, right?
Yes.
And you do it very well.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have been here. Thank you. Remember, democratic freedom and economic freedom, they go hand in hand.
Together, yeah.
Yes.
If you miss one of them, you have a problem.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
За, хүн төлөгчтэй өнөөдөр манай Defacto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Америкийн алдартай CNBC сэтгүүлийн алдартай сэтгүүлч Мишел Caruso-Cabrera оролцлоо. Их баярлалаа.